President Biden delivers remarks on college campus protest. You don't say, Mr. President. You don't say.
The ongoing college campus protests over the Israel-Hamas war. He says both freedom of speech and the rule of law must be upheld.
Before I head to North Carolina, I wanted to speak for a few moments about what's going on our college campuses here. We've all seen the images, and they put to the test two fundamental American principles. Excuse me. The first is the right to free speech and for people to peacefully assemble and make their voices heard. The second is the rule of law. Both must be upheld. We are not an authoritarian nation where we silence people or squash dissent. The American people are heard. In fact, peaceful protest is in the best tradition of how Americans respond to consequential issues.
So right off the bat, like, every part of this is a lie. Dissent is being squashed. The student protests were peaceful. And the American people are not being heard. Like seriously, like, a majority of the American public disagree with the handling of the Palestinian genocide on both, like, from the Israeli government and the American government.
But neither are we a lawless country. We are a civil society, and order must prevail. Throughout our history, we've often...
Okay, you know how the most annoying people on Twitter like to say that liberalism is the moderate wing of fascism? This is what they mean, and they're correct.
We face moments like this because we are a big, diverse, free-thinking, and freedom-loving nation. In moments like this, there are always those who rush in to score political points. But this isn't a moment for politics. It's a moment for clarity. So let me be clear. Peaceful protest in America. Violent protest is not protected. Peaceful
wasn't violent. They weren't violent protests. We've got plenty of video footage of violence being initiated by the police. We've got plenty of video footage of violence being initiated by these Zionist counter-protesters. You know, like, so I agree, like, get them out of here. But of course they didn't.
Peaceful protest is. It's against the law when violence occurs. Destroying property is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law.
Yeah, it is. There is a categorical difference between trespassing, occupation of property, or destruction of property versus attacking people. Literally all protests past a certain size contain some degree of damage and trespass. It is literally unavoidable if you get thousands and thousands of angry people together. If you want to use that as the demarcation for illegitimate protesting, then you would have been against the civil rights protests. Because I promise you, there was also property damage there. It is an inevitable component of mass protest. That is how it works. Like, literally everything. Yeah, you would be condemning the civil rights sit-ins. You would be condemning, like, the marches. You'd be condemning everything, you know? And, you know, Biden was around probably to have condemned them back then in whatever waffly fashion he did. I don't know what his exact statements were at the time, but he was already an adult when all that was happening, so, you know?
Vandalism, trespassing, breaking windows, shutting down campuses, forcing the cancellation of classes and graduations. None of this is a peaceful protest. Threatening people, intimidating people, instilling fear in people is not peaceful protest.
And I agree. So you should go after the Zionist counter-protesters. So this is, like, unironically fascistic rhetoric. It's no different to what the right did with BLM. I said this back then, and I'll say it again. There was nothing about liberalism or like American liberalism, American liberals, the Democratic Party, that was principally in favor of anything the Black Lives Matter protests represented. It was always political opportunism that they would lean into when convenient and lean against when not convenient. And it was always that simple, you know? Yeah, the shoe is on the other foot. Now, you know, for the liberals might be willing to play apologetics for the consequences of protests when it is against police brutality, even though they won't do anything materially. But when it comes to American global hegemony and protecting Israel from the consequences of its genocide, there will be no pretense. They will just crack down on it.
It's against the law. Dissent is essential to democracy, but dissent must never lead to disorder or
fascism. Sorry, right here, clear as day. Dissent must never lead to disorder. If permanent maintained order is the default state, that you seek to maintain through civil unrest, that is just cleanly, unambiguously, like the law and order, like the social good must be upheld, all dissent, like if it trespasses into threatening the status quo, is anti-American and against the law, like unambiguously, like 100%. We are fully doing the like scratch a liberal thing right now. I like how pearl-clutching libs act like how the civil rights protests weren't similar. Yeah, the funny thing is, as I understand it, Columbia University was proud and would brag about its student protests in favor of the Civil Rights Act or against the Vietnam War. They were so proud of the history of their bold students standing up against what we now in retrospect understand was bad. But Columbia University cracked down on those protesters then, and then they do it right now once again. You know, what is that? Yeah, liberals, yeah, proud of every protest except the current one, against everything except the current one. Yeah, like always, always, always. And 50 years from now, you know, they'll say, oh, wow, if only we had listened. Who couldn't have listened to those brave student protesters back then? Hopefully we learn a lesson from this, and then whatever issue in the future will arise, you know, they'll turn about on it as well. Here's Joe Biden, 1986, acting completely different with, oh, hold on.
What disturbs me more than the policy that you call a policy is the rationale for the policy. The rationale for the policy. You set out 4 principles that you adhere to, and then and I will go over them in a moment. Then you say on page 14, we must not become part of South Africa's problem. We must remain part of their solution. We must not aim to impose ourselves, our solutions, our favorites in South Africa. Damn it, we have favorites in South Africa. The favorites in South Africa are the people who are being repressed by that ugly white regime. We have favorites. Our loyalty is not to South Africa, it's to South Africans. And the South Africans are majority black, and they are being excoriated. It is not to...
Please keep in mind that the protests against apartheid in South Africa were orders of magnitude more tumultuous than anything happening in the United States now or during the Black Lives Matter protests. Like the pushback against apartheid was like riotous compared to what goes on here in the United States. But he's fine with it here, as long as it's in line with U.S. interests. As long as it's happening in a different country, you're not challenging U.S. interests. Then there you go. Yeah.
Some stupid puppet government over there. It is not to the Afrikaners regime. We have no loyalty to them. We have no loyalty to South Africa, to South Africans. And the fact of the matter is I listen to this rationale, first of all. It is the leaders of South Africa and their people, black and white, who have the majority responsibility. They must rise to it. Well, they are rising to it. They're rising to it. The only thing left available to do with that repulsive, repugnant regime of Afrikaners there. And it's the only way they have. They've tried everything for the last 20 years. They begged, they borrowed, they crawled, and now they're taking up arms. The second thing...
Oh, yeah. Oh, you see, literally, like, positively and aggressively supporting taking up arms against an oppressor group. But, oh, the Palestinians? Hamas, October 7th? Peaceful student protesting? What happened to Biden? Well, this was 40 years ago. So, you know, time passed. Yeah, a new perspective on 1968. Yeah, from columbianews.edu. Like, again, the Columbia University and a bunch of other universities have all jerked themselves off about how our administration may not have been supportive back then, but we're proud of our student body for, you know, for fighting valiantly, you know, against injustice and tyranny back then, even though we weren't at the time in the right, blah, 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 you know, and then it all happens again, you know, just remarkable. Really, like, you know, you got to give the most annoying people on Twitter credit, okay? As stupid and counterproductive as the ML communist hammer and sickle biotype people tend to be, you know, liberalism is the moderate wing of fascism. Liberals are in favor of every protest movement or progressive cause except the one currently happening. Like, I don't know. Those guys are really, really nailing it right now. Really feeling that one, I have to say.
Or to denying the rights of others so students can finish the semester and their college education. Look, it's basically a matter of fairness. It's a matter of what's right. There's the right to protest, but not the right to cause chaos.
This is being anti the right to protest. The you can do protests as long as you're civil line has been used to suppress every protest ever. This is the anti-protest line that everybody uses, you know? Like like this every single time. This is how it goes. Now again, there are limits, right? Like obviously if the student protesters actually were operating like a violent mob, then okay, like there's a conversation there. I don't think they should do that. But they weren't. They just weren't. It just wasn't happening. They were occupying peaceful encampments, and they were met with continuous violence from the police. The New York City Police Department went in and did crackdowns and arrested hundreds of people for doing nothing. The LAPD, as we're going to see soon, not only participated in a massive crackdown on UCLA, they enabled Zionist counter-protesters to go in there and engage in like actual violence, attacking people, striking them with weapons, throwing fireworks into the crowd, which the police just stood back and watched happen, you know? And all the while, the media lies about it.
People have the right to get an education, the right to get a degree, the right to walk across the campus safely without fear of being attacked. But let's be clear.
Which didn't happen, by the way, which just didn't happen. That just flatly didn't happen. The people who were attacked were the pro-Palestinian protesters. Those were the people who got attacked. Just flatly lying. And they know they're lying, too. They're fully aware of the fact that they're lying. We're just seeing American empire consolidate, okay? Look, you guys had a good time. You thought you had the right to criticize American geopolitical policy just because everyone now recognizes that Iraq and Afghanistan were bad moves. You think you have the right to stand against what this country does just because for the past decade and a half, all we've really done are limp-dicked, drone strikes in Syria? Well, no. When we commit to a conflict, it all comes right back out. Just like after we invaded Iraq, you would be blacklisted for criticizing George W. Bush. We're seeing it all happen again. Every trope, every bit of every propaganda strategy, every bit of manufactured consent, all of it comes rolling right out the door again. The only difference, of course, is that now the internet exists, which makes it very, 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 very difficult to fully consolidate these narratives without, like, actual full-on repression of information. Which, to be fair, they're trying to do right now with the Anti-Semitism Act, redefining anti-Semitism on campuses, so that includes stuff like criticizing Israel.
Clear about this as well. There should be no place on any campus, no place in America for anti-Semitism or threats of violence against Jewish students.
Which just, again, wasn't happening, except for, of course, the violence enacted against the Jewish students that were in the encampments.
There is no place for hate speech or violence of any kind, whether it's anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or discrimination against Arab Americans or Palestinian Americans. It's simply wrong. There's no place for racism in America. It's all wrong. It's un-American.
Oh, and remember, Biden is responsible for every police crackdown that you see. Biden is the president of the United States, the head of state. All of this is happening on his watch, under his supervision. He might not have direct control over the NYPD or the LAPD, but he has enormous influence in the rhetoric, the arguments, and he is fully enabling the right-wing line on this. There is no difference between what he is saying and what Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying, or what Lauren Boebert is saying, or what Mike Johnson is saying. They are saying the exact same things. They are all enabling it, okay? Whether or not he's directly in control of them doesn't change the fact that he is the one who trend sets, and he is setting this trend.
I understand people have strong feelings and deep convictions. In America, we respect the right and protect the right for them to express that. But it doesn't mean anything goes. It needs to be done without violence, without destruction, without hate, and within the law.
Biden is sanitizing the message. Yeah, this, again, like liberalism is the moderate wing of fascism. Like what he's doing, right, he's pushing the exact same line, but he's doing it under the guise of civility.
You know, make no mistake, as president, I will always defend free speech.
Shit like this, again, is one of the reasons why a few months ago I said that it's very possible Trump would have been better with regards to the Palestinian conflict, not because he would have been more, like, I don't know, rhetorically progressive, but because he would have been incompetent, whereas Biden is a competent statesman. It's possible that if the GOP was in charge over this, they would have been tripping over their dicks trying to find a way to link being pro-Israeli with being pro-Nazi, with being like pro-America first isolationist, and they would have ended up getting nothing done. So far, Biden seems to have done literally nothing to reel in Netanyahu, despite 6 months of heated talks between the two leaders. And here he is repeating like every right-wing line when it comes to cracking down on student protesters.
And I will always be just as strong in standing up for the rule of law. That's my
That's great.
responsibility to you, the American people, and my obligation to the Constitution. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, have the protests forced you to reconsider any of the policies with regard to the region?
No. Thank you.
Mr. President, do you think the National Guard
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Biden. Thanks.
should intervene?
No.
Mr. President,
Do you agree with what the students are calling for?
Mr. President, the former president said...
Great. Great stuff, guys. Fantastic. Absolutely wonderful. Glad we get one, once per generation, we get like the big crackdown, really reveling in it this time. They think they're being strong, but they're decimating their own voter base. I like, again, like it's so myopic in so many ways. It's genuinely psychotic, But this is how it goes. Oh, meanwhile, the other guy who could have been like a president,
I suggest to CNN and maybe some of my colleagues here, maybe take your cameras just for a moment off of Columbia and off of UCLA. Maybe go to Gaza and take your camera and show us the emaciated children who are dying of malnutrition because of Netanyahu's policies. Show us the kids who have lost their arms and their legs. Show us the suffering that is going on.
That's great. I don't remember the Iraq protests being quite this bad. The anti-Iraq war protests were massive. I don't remember the extent of the crackdowns against them. I think they were mostly just ignored. The main, media control that happened was that if you were in media when we invaded Iraq, you had a gun to your head. You were in favor of the invasion or it was over for your career. Like every single media outlet, every news line, every pundit, every politician, everyone fell in line in no time. Like the message from the top down was, we're invading Iraq. It is a matter of national security. This is an America thing. And if you don't go along with it, you're with the enemy. And they did. And they did. And that is how it went down. Yeah. I don't understand why journalists do this, because journalists have bosses. This is as cynical as I've ever been. Yeah, it's pretty difficult not to feel that way. But keep in mind, that's what they want. What they're trying to do is break the back of the protesters. They're trying to break people's spirit. And I just don't think that's going to happen. I don't think they're going to quiet this down. I don't think that this is part of some sinister high IQ master plan the Democrats have to silence dissent. I think this is a desperate effort to crack down on visible dissent that is not going to work well for them. I don't think they can stop this. Not without like a commitment to crackdown that they couldn't muster and wouldn't be able to draw support for. But yeah, they get their orders from the top down. It's to the point where liberal commentators are starting to claim the 1968 Vietnam protests were bad too. Yeah, and the bloodthirst that you see from some of these commentators too, where they're like sneering, like there was so much pretense early on from some of these like Zionist aligned commentators where you were like, like you're in favor of Hamas, you dumb little college students, whatever, they would throw you off the rooftop. And now they're like salivating at the idea of another Kent State, it seems, where they're just like just waiting for the NYPD to clear out a room by throwing a grenade in there or something. Yeah, it's psychotic, when the mask falls from Capitol, you remember the bourgeois are not human, etc., etc.